"You look like me," the lawyer grinned crookedly. "I think I got the better of the deal." "Are there any problems inherent with the masks?" Kyle asked next, as thorough as ever. "Only one flaw with these prosthetics, from what I've been told. The likenesses are perfect, that's not a problem. But the eyelids don't blink." "Important to know. Let's finish dressing then." Kyle put on the lawyer's clothes quickly, just in case a guard came by, which happened occasionally, though not usually during the legal sessions, when Kyle and the lawyer were left alone by law. Mason Wainwright had worn clothes a couple of sizes too small that day, including his trademark cowboy hat. When Kyle got to the boots, he inserted 2-inch lifts from out of the briefcase. Now he stood at a little over 6'2", close enough to the lawyer's height. Dressed in the prison jumpsuit, the lawyer was still taller than Kyle, but he would walk with the prisoner's habitual slump, so it wouldn't matter that much, if at all. They were ready now, but the plan called for them to stay together for the full hour, just as they always did. Everything exactly the same. Rituals to be observed. "Do you want to ask your questions, the 8?" the lawyer said. "Or should I ask them?" Kyle went through the usual questions. Then neither of them spoke for the remainder of the time they had together. Kyle Craig seemed to be almost in a trance, but he was just thinking ahead, making plans. Finally, when only a minute or so remained for the meeting, Kyle rose first, looking like the lawyer, of course. Then the lawyer stood, looking like Kyle Craig. Kyle extended his arms, and Mason Wainwright moved into them. "In your honor," the lawyer whispered. "I apologize that this took so long to arrange." "Masterpieces take time," said Kyle Craig.
Chapter 32.
Mason Wainwright was slumped over slightly and looking down at the floor when the guard opened the door to the small meeting room.
"Let's go, Craig," the guard ordered. "Play period's over, time to go back to your suite."
Wainwright muttered his assent, then he moved down the hallway in front of the ill-tempered turnkey. He was bent over and shuffling like the dead man walking he was supposed to be. "Just don't let him see you blink," he reminded himself. This was the time when the whole plan could go up in flames. Everything could be lost in the next few minutes. His part was an easy one to play, though. Stay calm, keep quiet, head down, unless the guard noticed some change, some error on his part. The lawyer had studied Kyle Craig's mannerisms for months and believed he pretty much had everything down. Still, he couldn't be certain until this was over. Suddenly the guard's nightstick was in the small of his back. What was this? Shit, no! He'd obviously made a mistake and wondered what it was. Where had he messed up and ruined the escape Kyle Craig had been planning since the first day he arrived at the super maximum security prison? Maybe even before then, since the mastermind seemed to anticipate everything that could possibly happen.
"This way, mastermind, you forget the way to your own cell, genius," the guard said, and laughed derisively. "Come on, let's move it, gotta get back to my court TV."
The lawyer didn't look around at the prison guard, didn't acknowledge him in any way, just turned down the indicated corridor and continued to slump along. Fortunately, nothing else went wrong on the way back to Kyle Craig's cell. Finally, the guard slammed the door, and Wainwright was alone. He'd done it! Only then did the lawyer raise his eyes and dare to look around. So this was where the mastermind had lived, and how he had lived for the past several years. What a disgrace that such a fine mind would be trapped in a space with virtually no stimulation, and that Kyle had been subject to the urges and whims of bestial prison guards and slow-witted administrators. "In your honor," the lawyer whispered again. Then he prepared himself to follow the rest of Kyle Craig's instructions. The lawyer checked out the small cell, which was made of poured concrete. The bed, desk, stool, and bedside table were screwed into the floor as a safety precaution. The toilet had an automatic shutdown so cells couldn't be flooded. Kyle had earned a black-and-white TV, but it only played self-help and religious programming, so who would want to watch it? The lawyer felt claustrophobic, terribly so, and thought that it would be difficult not to lose one's sanity in this tiny hellhole. Mason Wainwright finally had to laugh at that. Most people would feel that he had lost his sanity a long time ago, even before he became one of the mastermind's disciples. When a guard did a check just before mealtime at 6 that night, he couldn't believe what he saw. He immediately pushed the panic button on his belt. Then he waited for help to come running. Still, the guard couldn't take his eyes away from the jail cell. Kyle Craig had hung himself.
Chapter 33.
The sun was shining in Kyle Craig's eyes, and what a glorious thing that was. The sun. Imagine. He drove Mason Wainwright's Jaguar coupe a couple of miles over the speed limit to a mall outside Denver, where a Mercedes SUV was waiting for him. Now this was more like it. Power and comfort. Plus nobody would be looking for the Mercedes. Kyle Craig had doubters to confound and frustrate, followers to delight, promises to keep, promises written in blood, promises recorded in the august Washington Post and the New York Times. Yes, he would see the sun again, and he'd see a whole lot more than that, too. He was traveling to Washington, but he thought he'd take a roundabout route, visit a few enemies, maybe kill them in their own homes. He was going to make a name for himself again, and he had a plan on how to do it. Not a word of it on paper, though. Everything in his head. "My God, just look at that sun," he exclaimed.
Chapter 34. I was home on 5th Street and had just finished eating a late dinner with Nana and the kids when the phone started to ring off the hook. Most of us were in the kitchen doing a family cleanup. Damon, Janny, and I were taking care of everything. Ali was supervising, and Nana was reading the papers in the living room, the Washington Post and USA Today, her favorites. Her TV show was on tonight, too, Grey's Anatomy. Nana loved the series because she felt there were 3 very bright and true-enough-to-life black characters in the ensemble cast, which she believed was a first for TV. Grey's Anatomy was one thing that she and I agreed on. We were both addicts of the medical drama, and we were rarely disappointed for our devotion and attention. Janny frowned when she answered the phone and discovered to her amazement that it wasn't for her. "It's for you, Daddy." "What a surprise," I said. "Major upset." "It's not a girl." Janny came right back. "So you can forget about that. It's not Bree." I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I heard during the next few confounding seconds on the telephone. "Alex, this is Hal Brady." Brady was the chief of detectives these days at the MPD, an old friend, the boss of Thor Richter and all the rest of us. "Hi, Chief." I managed a few words, but mostly I was in an intent listening mode. The fact that Brady was calling me at home wasn't a good sign. "This isn't about Bree, is it?" I suddenly had a premonition. No, Bree's fine. In fact, she's in the office with me now. I'll let you talk with her in a minute," Brady said, then continued. "Alex, the reason I'm calling is that Kyle Craig escaped from ADX Florence sometime today. They're still working out the details of how he did it, but this can't be good. Not for you, not for any of us. He's on the loose. They have no idea where he went." I didn't hesitate for a second. "I need a favor," I told the chief. "A big favor." Chapter 35. I'd been out to the super-maximum security prison in Florence a couple of times since Kyle Craig had been incarcerated there. On the flight, I made a few notes about him from the papers I'd collected over the years. Even as I scribbled the notes, I was recalling certain incidents between us. At one time, Kyle had been a friend. At least I'd thought so. He'd fooled a lot of people along the way, and I have always been a terrible sucker for those who seem to lead a good life. I wrote in my notepad, "Expects to be recognized as superior, has a grandiose sense of his own self-importance, narcissistic to an extreme, interpersonally exploitive, complex thinker, superficial charm, can turn it on and off at will, sibling rivalry, probably killed one brother, severely abused, physically and emotionally, by his father, or so he claims. Duke University undergraduate and law school, top of his class. Made it look easy. IQ, 145 to 155 range. No conscience. Father, William Highland Craig, former Army general, chairman of 2 Fortune 500 companies, now deceased. Mother, Miriam, still living in Charlotte. Former FBI DIC, trained at Quantico, where he also taught new agents. Highly competitive, especially with me. I arrived in Florence, Colorado around noon the day after Kyle's escape, and very little seemed to have changed about the super-maximum security prison. I spent the first hour talking with 2 of the guards who knew Kyle Craig particularly well. Then I interviewed Warden Richard Kroc. The warden seemed more shocked than any of us that Kyle or anybody else could have escaped from Florence. No one ever had before. No one had even come close. "As you now know," Kroc told me, "the lawyer went back to Craig's cell wearing a prosthetic mask and then hung himself there. What you don't know is that we videotaped some of his early visits with Craig. Would you like to see them?" I sure did. Chapter 36. For the next few hours, I sat and studied tapes of some of the early meetings between Kyle and Mason Wainwright. The lawyer hadn't invoked his lawyer-client privilege until the 3rd week he'd spent with his client. Why was that? Because Kyle wanted us to see something? Or maybe because the lawyer did. What, though? The first visit was virtually the same as the others that were taped. Wainwright entered the meeting room wearing a very memorable outfit, which no doubt helped with the eventual escape. Cowboy hat and boots, buckskin jacket, horn-rimmed eyeglasses that clashed with everything else he had on. He and Kyle hugged as soon as they met. Kyle said something that wasn't caught on tape. Then came a series of 8 questions, always the same ones, or very close. Some kind of code? Or was Kyle playing games? Or simply crazy? He and the lawyer. I couldn't tell at this point. About anything, really. Except that Kyle Craig was the first prisoner ever to escape from ADX Florence. The mastermind had done the impossible. Finally, Kyle and the lawyer hugged each other again. Wainwright said something to Kyle that wasn't picked up on tape. Was this how they exchanged information, whether they were taped or not? I expected that it was. We would certainly try to find out. Next, I went to Kyle's cell, but there wasn't much to see in there. Prisoners weren't allowed many personal possessions at ADX. The small room was neat and orderly, as Kyle was himself. Then I saw the message he'd left. A greeting card was propped on the table that was bolted down next to his bed. It was a hallmark, unsigned, just like the ones at Tess Olson's penthouse. Minutes later, I was back at Warden Kroc's office. I needed some answers to questions that had developed in the past few hours. "Visitors?" I asked. "We know about the lawyer, though we have no idea what his real relationship to Craig was. Were there other visitors? Anyone who came around more than once?" Kroc didn't have to consult his files to answer. "In the first year, there was a persistent reporter from the Los Angeles Times named Joseph Wisen, whom Craig refused to see, repeatedly. Several others contacted Craig through my office, but didn't bother to come out here because he wouldn't see them either. The only one who did visit, and this was just a few months ago, was the author Tess Olson. You know, the woman who was killed in Washington recently? Kyle surprised us. He agreed to meet with her. She came here 3 times. She